Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, we take you to the unveiling of the improved Korean War Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. Then we see the future of drones in air combat, plus a lengthy prison sentence for a soldier who stormed the U.S. Capitol. And we delve into why a machinists union is rejecting Boeing's latest contract. And later we go into the Army lab where scientists are working to keep your hands from freezing in the cold without gloves. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. The Korean War Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. has always been among the most vivid of the Capitol's monuments, with its life-size statues on patrol and ghostly faces of veterans on the wall. Well, it's recently been improved to display the names of Americans and Koreans who died in the conflict. We were there to see the unveiling of the recent improvements.
The families of the fallen. That's why we are here now, for the families of the fallen. We wanted to have this special ceremony today as an event for you to see the Wall of Remembrance for the first time.
The upgraded and newly unveiled Korean War Veterans Memorial was open on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. this week. On Tuesday, family members of the fallen were able to see their loved ones' names on the memorial for the first time before it opened to the public. Hundreds of Korean War veterans and family members were on hand for the recent unveiling, which showed off the monument's premier new feature, the Wall of Remembrance. Many people are familiar with the memorial's haunting life-size statues of troops on patrol. But the wall offered a new opportunity for people to connect personally with those who lost their lives in the conflict.
I came to find the name of my brother, Daniel Doolin, who died in October 1950. I wanted to see his name in this country. It's the only marker we have because he never returned home. He was killed in North Korea at the age of 18. Just 24 hours after leaving Kimpo base and flying over, and he was a paratrooper. He was my first love and my first grief. He died at 18, I was 6. And 2 months before he died, he wrote a letter to his mother saying, "I won't forget Brenda." I love that they did this. It's more emotion than I can even deal with now. It takes me a while to say this is another layer. I'm giving him a life, that when he died in 1950, it wasn't over. Because as the saying goes, as long as you love somebody, they never die, they never go, they're never forgotten.
On the new wall are all the names of the 36,574 American service members and more than 7,200 members of the Korean augmentation units lost in the war.
My father was killed at the Chosin Reservoir in December 2nd, 1950, 4 weeks before I was born. And I want to make sure that what people call the Forgotten War, that my father's never forgotten. So this is one of those steps in able to do that. And I'm very, very proud of my father. I'm very proud to be his son, James F. Johnson, Sergeant, United States Army.
You know, it's hard to explain. The hair in the back of my head stands up if I see the platoon over here. Those were my boys, you know, and it brings the tears. It brings back a lot of memories you sooner forget, but at the same time, some that are really precious, you know. It's an emotional experience. Even my breathing gets a little bit tough. It's hard to talk. I was here last night, and this area is beautiful, and I touched the names, and I could feel the heat. And I knew that they were here. You know, you just know.
And now for some military news. An active duty soldier has been sentenced to 44 months in prison for assaulting officers who protected the Capitol during the January 6th insurrection. Federal prosecutors said that James Philip Malt traveled from Rochester, New York with friends and took part in a mob that attacked officers in the Lower West Terrace Tunnel. He later climbed the tunnel archway and doused officers with a chemical spray. Malt was then a member of the New York Army National Guard and joined the active duty Army after the failed insurrection. Federal agents arrested him at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where he served as a combat engineer with the 82nd Airborne Division. An Army spokesperson told Army Times that he passed a background check after the January 6th riot, and there was nothing in his file to prevent him from serving at the time. The U.S. made a big move to help Ukrainian soldiers wounded in the war there, with the approval to have them treated at a major American military hospital in Germany. Recently, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced that Ukrainian troops could receive treatment at the Lunstall Regional Medical Center, a large hospital used for decades to treat troops injured in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. The plan was approved more than a month ago, but no Ukrainian troops have yet been treated at the hospital. The recent announcement was meant to formalize the plan and remove red tape. The U.S. military is authorized to treat up to 18 Ukrainian troops at the hospital. And last week it was missiles. This week it's torpedoes. Want to see how the U.S. and allied navies launch underwater warheads at targets? The Navy released more footage recently of a variety of different torpedo delivery systems from the recent Rim of the Pacific exercise. Video showed the Royal Canadian Navy frigate Winnipeg launching several torpedoes and a CH-148 Cyclone helicopter demonstrating an aerial drop. The launches were part of the annual multinational naval exercise that brings together countries like the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, among a long list of others. There's no footage this year of those torpedoes hitting a target, but if it shows up, we'll bring it to you. And finally, the Senate Armed Services Committee recently held a confirmation hearing for Lieutenant General Michael Langley to become the Marine Corps' first Black four-star general. Langley was nominated by President Joe Biden in June to lead U.S. Africa Command, the combatant command responsible for military operations on the African continent. Langley joined the Marine Corps in 1985 and has master's degrees from both the U.S. Army and Naval War Colleges.
It is a great honor to be the President's nominee to lead U.S. AFRICOM. The command will continue to address the dual challenges of strategic competition and violent extremism. The People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation continue to expand their access and influence across the continent. Simultaneously, organizations such as Al-Shabaab, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and JNAM expand their reach and threaten American citizens and our interests. If confirmed, I will campaign to address these issues and work with fellow combatant commanders to ensure our plans are integrated across the globe.
Following the committee's hearing recently, Langley's nomination now heads to the full Senate for a vote. He is expected to be confirmed. And that's it for our military headlines. But stick around. When we return, we'll see the future of drones over the battlefields. The F-35 is billed as the most advanced combat fighting aircraft in the world. Built by Lockheed Martin, the aircraft has a top speed of Mach 1.6. advanced sensors capable of tracking enemy targets and jamming radars, and carries precision-guided missiles. And the jets can share the data gathered in the air with control centers on the ground. Lockheed Martin test pilot and former naval aviator Tony Wilson says these aircraft are on the cutting edge of technology.
The F-35 is a fifth-gen fighter, and what that means is stealth and sensor fusion brought together to ensure that the pilot is flying the most capable, the most connected, the most survivable fighter aircraft on the face of the planet.
Fifth-generation fighters are a big draw at the Farnborough International Air Show, one of the world's biggest aviation, defense, and aerospace expos. The air show also is a place for drone manufacturers to show the latest unmanned technology. Defense contractors outline how artificial intelligence and other technologies will be used to fight from the sky. At stake are many billions of dollars as countries update military fleets or pump up defense procurement budgets amid rising geopolitical tensions. So, could drone tech redefine what it means to own the airspace? Machines are taking on a bigger role in the cockpit, and in some cases, getting rid of the pilot altogether.
Everything a drone does today at some point was done by a pilot. But if you look at the evolution over the last 30 or 40 years, it started off with the classical reconnaissance mission of having only electro-optical sensors, basically cameras. In the beginning, it was only day cameras. Today, we are using a lot of infrared cameras, which gives us the ability to operate at night as well. And there we are building a lot of other layers of sensors that can collect information.
With unmanned technology rapidly advancing, will pilots be out of a job? One U.S. F-35 pilot hopes not.
I can say is a lot of people talk about, the way of the future, possibly taking the pilot out of the aircraft. That's definitely not something that any of us look forward to. I'd like to keep my job as long as possible, but it's hard to argue with newer technology, and if that's the way of the future, that's what it is. But I'm just here to enjoy it while I can.
Drones have been used extensively in the war between Russia and Ukraine and other modern conflicts, raising the question of just how much need there is for human pilots to fly expensive fighter jets and other aircraft, or whether unmanned aerial vehicles could do the job. Technology already has removed the need for a second person to sit in the back seat and work the radar. But it's too soon to write an epitaph for the pilot.
So far, the job of drones has been largely confined to reconnaissance and, if you will, targeted assassination and very light strike, not a lot more. If we had had this conversation 20 years ago, almost everyone was certain that some of them would be serving in a combat aircraft replacement role. That simply hasn't happened.
There's a next generation of fighter jets in the concept stages that offers even more high-tech advances, including potentially pilotless versions, but those won't arrive before the next decade at the earliest. The Pentagon's Air Combat Evolution Program, run by its DARPA research agency, has been looking at incorporating artificial intelligence into warfighting, including designing a plane that can fly itself in a dogfight. But in the near future, air warfare is likely to be human pilots and drone machines working together.
Now, what is interesting is now drones are increasingly seen as an adjunct to piloted platforms. Loyal wingman, as they're called. Basically, something that supplements crewed platforms in the sky, allows them to get out there with a greater combat aircraft punch.
And now for defense dollars. The union representing almost 2,500 machinists at 3 Boeing defense factories has voted to reject the company's latest contract offer and strike beginning August 1st. The International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, District 837, said talks broke down over what it saw as inadequate retirement benefits. The union added that it cannot accept a contract that makes billions while taking away its members' pensions, while it's unwilling to, quote, adequately compensate our members' 401k plans. Boeing told Defense News that it has a contingency plan in case of a strike. You can read more about the negotiations from Stephen Losey's story on defensenews.com. Pseudo-satellites are one step closer to flying for months on end, high over regular air traffic. As militaries seek to have drones fly for long periods of time, higher than a commercial jet, the solar-powered Zephyr beat its own flight length record with 36 days completed so far and counting. Army Futures Command reported the milestone late last week. The command launched the aircraft on June 15th over Arizona and has remained deployed some 70,000 feet over the state. That's more than twice the altitude of a commercial jet. The pilotless aircraft's previous record was about 26 days in 2018. The first stratospheric UAS of its kind, Zephyr can fly continuously for months at a time, far above weather and conventional air traffic. It has a wingspan of just over 82 feet, longer than 2 school buses placed end to end, but weighs less than 166 pounds. The aircraft is intended for reconnaissance and can be outfitted with several types of sensors. The Zephyr is being developed by Airbus Defence and Space. When we return, we hear from our personal finance expert on ways to avoid financial trouble with credit cards. Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack gives her latest tips. This week, we talk credit cards.
Managing credit responsibly can be one of the biggest challenges of your financial life, but it doesn't have to be. You are the master of your own credit destiny, so just create habits that'll keep you on the good side of credit. Your payment history is super important to your credit score, which is why it's super important to always pay on time. An excellent payment history also helps you get lower interest rates on loans and credit. Setting your bills on autopay is a great way to get your payment history in A+ status faster. Also, when you pay more than the minimum balance each month, especially on credit card debt. This helps you pay it off faster and keeps you from reaching or exceeding your limit, which can bring down your credit score. And while having lots of credit cards can be a great way to maximize rewards, it's also an easy way to lose control. Using 1 or 2 cards helps keep debt at bay and keeps better track of your spending. Good habits are just as easy to create as bad ones. So do the right things with your credit and you'll save yourself a little stress and a whole lot of money.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more of our coverage, be sure to check out our headlines online at Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Times.com and DefenseNews.com. And to get a list of our top stories in your inbox every weekday, subscribe to our Early Bird Brief. And make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And when we come back, we take a look at a new way the Army is trying to keep your hands warm in the cold. North Korea, Russia, China. Those potential hotspots are also the coldest. And as anyone who has operated in the cold can tell you, your finger dexterity is the first to go. Military Times' Sarah Sicard recently visited a lab in Natick, Massachusetts, where scientists are working on getting soldiers' fingers to operate in freezing temperatures.
Cold weather environments. Not only are they uncomfortable, but you also lose finger dexterity. It's hard enough to open a pickle jar when your hands are freezing, much less fire a weapon or even enter some vital information into a tablet. Put on gloves and you're still a little bit more comfortable, but doing everything is still a pain. Well, what if you can warm up the blood before it even reaches your hands? Military Times editor Sarah Sicard traveled to Natick, Massachusetts, to the lab at the U.S. Army's Thermal Mountain Medical Division. There, she got to experience the cold and see the tech that might keep your hands in the fight, even when it's freezing.
So can you explain a little bit about where we are and what we're looking at?
Yes, we're at the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine. And I work in the Thermal and Mountain Medicine Division. So we study human performance in heat, cold, high altitude, and subterranean environments. And we're here looking at some devices to try to improve manual dexterity in the cold and and allow soldiers to do their jobs much better. Because when you put gloves on, you lose your manual dexterity. It decreases by about 60 to 70%, which is quite significant. So we wanted to be able to improve dexterity with bare hands. And we can see that if we're in extremely cold environments, we could see eventually that we can keep their hands comfortable, so then if they have to like maybe take off their mittens to do a task, they can perform that task in that extremely cold environment and then put them back on when they're done.
So what are we looking at here?
So these are several prototypes that we've developed over the years, trying to improve hand blood flow and finger temperatures during cold exposure. So this first one we developed 5 years ago when we were coming up with the concept of where we should provide heat at a low power and at a low battery cost. And so we did some testing in our laboratory here, and we found that if we could just place this around the forearm, that we could improve finger temperatures and hand temperatures by about 3 degrees Celsius. And that translated into about a 50% improvement in manual dexterity and about a 90% improvement in finger strength. The idea was to take that prototype idea and then build a device that has a self-sustained battery and that can be worn by a person in a field environment. And so when we plug that in, we'll heat that heater up to about 42 degrees Celsius, or about 107 degrees Fahrenheit.
Physiologically, how does forearm heat translate into finger dexterity?
So what's happening is essentially that when we move heat from the heater into the arm, that heat will eventually, through blood flow, make its way down into the hand and into the finger. So when people are in cold environments, their dexterity starts to decrease. And after it gets lower than about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, it starts to decrease quite rapidly. And so what we're trying to do is just increase that finger temperature, and when we raise that finger temperature, we're also increasing the dexterity of the fingers.
So when do you think that soldiers could see this on the battlefield?
We hope to see this sometime like in about 2028, 2030.
Now that you've heard what it's about, let's take a look inside the chamber.
So can you tell us a little bit about where we are right now?
Yes, of course. So this is one of our thermal environmental chambers. So they're about 12 feet by 12 feet where we control the environmental conditions.
And what kind of experiments do you guys do in here?
So we study how different individuals respond to heat stress or cold stress. So oftentimes warfighters have to go into hot or cold environments. And so we test different interventions to see how we can improve their physical performance.
And what temperatures do these two chambers go up to or down to?
Yeah, so they go down to about freezing, so roughly 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and we can heat them up all the way to about 50 degrees Celsius, which is about 122 degrees Fahrenheit.
And what sort of areas do these experiments touch on? Is it food, clothing, like how what kind of physiological responses do you guys test?
Yeah, so we can test various intervention strategies. So some of what we test are we test different clothing items to see whether they keep soldiers warmer or keep them cooler in heat stress. We test various nutritional interventions and how we can use those to improve performance in extreme environments. We can study how people adapt to different environments, so we can have individuals in these chambers repeatedly and then study how they adapt to cold or hot environments.
And how cold is it in here right now?
It's about freezing, so it's about 32 degrees Fahrenheit.
So I think we're going to get out of here.
And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.